Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my videos, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our last episode, we discussed how the Eastern Empire officially commenced hostilities with the Monster Federation. Under Rimuru's orders, Gabra led a charge that shattered several airships with his soul might. Meanwhile, the Empire's Flying Combat Corps responded swiftly, employing magical disturbance rays to immobilize Gabra's unit. On the other hand, after witnessing Gabra's formidable strength, Major General Farraga of the enemy command mistook him for the storm dragon Veldora, believing the Empire's victory was imminent. This video will delve into the battles of Primordial Demon Ultima and Gabta. Let's get started. Convinced that the immobilized Gabra was the storm dragon Veldora, the soldiers of the Flying Combat Corps could barely contain their glee. Within the flagship airship, there was a prevailing atmosphere of a sweeping victory. Major General Farraga jubilantly proposed to share his centuries-old hidden cache of red wine with the officers and crew, to celebrate the Empire's avenging of its 350-year-old defeat to Veldora. At that moment, an unfamiliar voice wafted through the air, expressing a wish to partake in the red wine. Farraga then noticed a beautiful young girl with a purple ponytail sitting beside him among the officers' seats. Startled, Farraga immediately demanded to know when she had appeared. He regretted his and his comrades' oversight but quickly composed himself. More pressing than when she appeared was the question of who this young girl was. The prepared celebratory soldiers turned their heads in bewilderment, looking back and forth between Farraga and the purple-haired girl. However, the girl had no intention of honestly answering the interrogation. The purple-haired girl did not respond to Farraga's questions, her attention fixed on the red wine, suggesting that tea would suffice if wine was unavailable. She claimed to have been touring the airship and was quite thirsty. Farraga's anger flared. He stood up, turned towards the girl, and while pulling out a gun, demanded once more to know who she was. Yet even with a gun pointed at her, the girl showed no sign of being shaken. After all, her true identity was that of one of the world's most formidable beings, Primordial Purple. With a relaxed and proud expression, she declared her name as Ultima, a very important name given to her by her Rimuru-sama. Farraga observed Ultima calmly, unmistakably sensing the aura of an archdemon, a presence as daunting as standing before the Empire's Imperial Guardians, an undoubted state of emergency. However, Farraga was not unnerved. He was well versed in tactics to combat demons. Yet, why would such an archdemon suddenly appear here? As Farraga pondered, he quickly surmised Ultima's motives, drawing an erroneous conclusion. He identified Ultima as a minion of the immobilized Gabra outside, whom he believed to be Storm Dragon Veldora. Ultima was baffled, not understanding what Farraga meant by Veldora's minion. With arrogance, Farraga proclaimed that the storm dragon Veldora had been immobilized by their forces, and now, with this situation, the demon girl named Ultima had no other reason to be there but to rescue her master. Ultima remained puzzled, asserting she was a loyal servant of Demon Lord Rimuru. However, Farraga insisted she must have come to aid Veldora. Completely confused, Ultima didn't understand what the constant references to Veldora meant. Somehow, they were talking past each other, each in their own world. As Ultima wore an innocent expression, even Farraga started to sense a misunderstanding on his part. Without paying heed to Farraga, Ultima began to reveal her purpose there, to gather intelligence, including the structure and operational methods of the airship, and incidentally, to find out how many strong individuals there were within the Empire. She hoped Farraga would be forthcoming with the information. Hearing this blatant disrespect, Farraga naturally refused. Despite feeling unsettled by Ultima's malevolent aura, he had covertly prepared his men to combat the demon, planning to use their secret weapon, the magical disturbance rays, to seal her movement. And so, as his subordinates signaled readiness, Farraga pulled the trigger without hesitation, a shot that became the signal for battle, as the room was engulfed in the influence of the magical disturbance ray. When the gunfire ceased, Ultima sat unruffled, the 8 bullets intended for her now slipping from her open left hand, clinking onto the floor. However, Farraga wasn't surprised. He holstered his gun and swiftly drew his saber, the Imperial Magic Saber, an aura sword of even greater might. A cut from this blade could injure even a demon, especially now that Ultima's magic was sealed. With just hand-to-hand combat without magic, Farraga was confident he wouldn't lose to a demon known for their magical prowess. Ultima realized that her opponent was finally ready to fight. Farraga stated only a fool would negotiate with a demon, successfully causing Ultima to ponder if the fool referred to her. Watching the dazed demon before him, Farraga confidently asserted that there were many unknown strong beings in the world, himself included. Taking advantage of Ultima's moment of confusion about the fool reference, Farraga lunged forward, aiming a precise stab at her heart with his saber. But the killing blow didn't even reach Ultima, it merely punctured the chair. At that moment, Ultima's voice came from behind Farraga, stating she would be the one to kill him last. She could obtain the knowledge she sought even if the Imperial soldiers refused to speak. Ultima, still wearing an innocent expression, glanced around at the soldiers before switching to a terrifying tone, announcing she would start with the one on that side. Farraga turned in panic at the sound of a crisp cutting noise, only to see a round object flying past the edge of his vision before splattering against the wall, a human head. Ultima expressed disappointment that the head seemed to know nothing, then nonchalantly repeated her action, easily plucking heads like toys into her hand. After gathering her desired information, she tossed the heads against the walls, turning them into pulpy masses, with vile fluids oozing out. The airship had become a vision of hell. Farraga hastily ordered the magical disturbance rays to be set to maximum power, and contacted other airships to focus their beams on his flagship. Despite the panic around him, Farraga remained as calm as possible, issuing orders. But Ultima, tilting her head cutely, expressed her confusion. While the Empire's prized magical disturbance ray did affect monsters, it had no effect on her. Nevertheless, Farraga firmly believed Ultima was bluffing, confident that she couldn't withstand the focus beam. After all, it was the same ray they believed could immobilize Storm Dragon Veldora. As he shouted, it was as if he refused to accept the frightening reality. Ultima cheerfully stated that such a thing was meaningless to archdemons. Just as humans breathe naturally, using magic was an everyday affair for her. With those words, Ultima vanished, and at the same time, the head of the communications soldier at the back of the room flew off. Patiently, Ultima explained that she had merely moved, and even without releasing a shockwave, the man's head had flown off because the movement was magical. Then, with a gentle wave of her hand, a vague silhouette could be seen from her fingertips, followed by a bang, the head of Farraga's aide exploded. Ultima continued, saying that releasing a shockwave following physical laws was also simple for her. Like a teacher demonstrating to a student, Ultima calmly committed these terrible acts. Faced with this scene, Farraga fell silent, realizing from these nonsensical facts that the demon before him was no ordinary archdemon. After all, the magical disturbance rays that could even bind Veldora seemed utterly ineffective against her. Moments later, sensing the futility of battling Ultima, Farraga descended into madness. It was for this reason that he spared no expense in unleashing his final trump card, the strongest summoning magic to combat demons, summoning Greater Elemental of Fire, Ifrit. Given the natural advantage elementals held over demons, Farraga was convinced that even if Ultima was an archdemon, she couldn't defeat this elemental. As the summoning commenced, Farraga confidently declared that despite Ultima's formidable strength, he had prepared thoroughly, and it was all going to end here. However, as he spoke, Farraga's voice trailed off because Ultima had simply blown a breath, and the incarnation of absolute power, the Greater Elemental of Fire, was frozen and shattered by elemental ice magic. It was all over. Realizing this, Farraga and the surrounding officers descended into panic, crying out in horror. Minutes later, Ultima nodded with a smile, having sensed the brainwaves of the soldiers to glean the information she required. As Chief Intelligence Officer of the Monster Federation, she had completed all the tasks Rimuru-sama had assigned to her. Thinking of Rimuru's possible praise made Ultima incredibly happy as she turned her gaze to the only survivor, Farraga. Intending to give Farraga, who had called her a fool, the best terror as a gift, Ultima conjured a fist-sized black flame in her left hand. Farraga knew what this flame was. It was nuclear magic, hellfire that appeared when nuclear flame was activated. This widespread explosive magic, even in wartime, posed a strategic level threat. But Ultima casually tossed it as if it were nothing. After bidding take care and goodbye, Ultima left the flagship, leaving Farraga standing in a daze. The uncontrollable hellfire began to swell, engulfing the flagship in a black fireball that vaporized the hull in an instant, causing the delicate instruments to fail and trigger chain explosions. The black fireball didn't vanish. It continued to expand, consuming nearby airships and causing a series of chain reactions. Even the airships at the far end were struck down by the blast debris. The flying combat corps led by Farraga was utterly decimated. Charred to a crisp, Farraga's very soul felt the agony of being burned. With endless despair and the fortune of having witnessed ultimate magic before his demise, Farraga's life came to an end. And so, the Empire's ace unit, the Flying Combat Corps, which hadn't even had the chance to face the real Veldora, was completely sunk. Watching the expanding fireball, Ultima left the scene contentedly. However, Ultima quickly noticed something strange. Despite the magical disturbance rays being lifted, Gabiru remained motionless in the air. Concerned that the growing nuclear flame might reach Gabiru, Ultima, albeit reluctantly, flew back into the air to forcibly remove the dazed Gabiru. Impatiently, Ultima asked what Gabiru had been doing all this time. After greeting Ultima respectfully, Gabiru shared that he had a new sensation. At Ultima's urging, Gabiru returned to safety and explained his reason for spacing out. While bathed in the magical disturbance radiation, he became aware of the ray's ability to influence magicules and decided to see how long he could endure it, which was why he had remained still. Thanks to this experiment, he realized a way to enhance his own power by using the force of thought to control the rampant magicules within, thus extending the duration of his dragon warrior transformation. Proudly, Gabiru shared his discovery, causing a stir among his subordinates as if they had found new lands to explore. Ultima thought to herself that Gabiru conducting such experiments on the battlefield might result in a severe scolding from Rimuru-sama later. However, she then realized that what came naturally to her was so difficult for Gabiru. Observing the expressions of Gabiru's subordinates, Ultima had a tempting idea. Her logic was that if she trained Gabiru, he would certainly become stronger, and a stronger Gabiru would please Rimuru-sama. If Rimuru-sama was pleased, the chances of Ultima being praised would increase. Elated by the thought of earning Rimuru's praise, Ultima smiled adorably and then declared she would assist Gabiru and his subordinates in real combat training. With his mission completed, Gabiru, along with Primordial Purple Ultima, set off to support the battlefield where Gobta was located. The focus shifted to Gobta. As the goblin riders hastily retreated into the forest, Rimuru's command to crush the enemy with full force resonated deep within everyone's soul. Gobta muttered to himself, for the goblin riders had been feigning a tense standoff with the enemy to draw out the being rumored to be a threat to Rimuru-sama. Gobta was concerned, but since the order had been issued, it was time to go all out and unleash all the power they possessed. Gobta activated Magic Wolf transformation, and the hitherto patient Ranga responded. The next instant, the two of them, now in sync, released their inner magical power. Black mist enveloped Gobta, and in a flash, Ranga entered Gobta's body. As the black mist dissipated, a humanoid giant wolf with two fierce horns appeared, the unified form of two of the Monster Federation's executive members, Gobta and Ranga. At this moment, Gobta was truly one of the Big Four. Ignoring the incoming artillery fire, Gobta alone charged to the forefront of the 2,000 tank units. The tanks immediately scattered, ablaze and enveloped in dust. But as the smoke cleared, Gobta remained unharmed, standing like a nightmare incarnate, ready to reveal his true strength. With a roar from Gobta, black lightning struck from above the tank units. The 1,000 interconnected tanks, meant to halt the goblin riders, now served as perfect conductors for the current and intense heat. Black lightning pierced through the defensive barriers of the tank brigade, casting an impressive glow. One after another, the tanks exploded, and the soldiers inside scrambled out in panic, fleeing in all directions to avoid being caught in the electrifying assault, presenting a scene of utter defeat. Witnessing the enemy's dire state, Gobta couldn't help but laugh. Under Milim's tutelage, Gobta and Ranga had honed their strength to levels incomparable to those displayed at the martial tournament. Gazing at the once formidable iron wall of tanks that had stood before him, Gobta roared without hesitation, shattering the tanks to pieces. Then, Gobta and Ranga, transforming into a whirlwind of black fury, charged at the remaining tank brigade, obliterating the enemy forces with unpredictable and incalculable movements. Rampaging across the battlefield, Gobta unleashed his wide-ranging annihilation skill, Dance with Wolves, which morphed into a damaged tornado storm, wiping out all the frontline troops and causing a portion of the battlefield to collapse into chaos. Alright, that's all for this video. In the next episode, we will dive into the battle involving Testarossa and explore the event known as the Lakeshore Dyed Scarlet that has recorded in the Imperial Archives. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support fuels my continued efforts. See you in the next one.